hope to cover new result that we obtained in this in the last year since I last gave a talk at TIFR. This will be based mainly on a series of papers we have written with some of my students, Orsella, who is now a postdoc at UCLA, Eviatar Sabak, who is a postdoc at Oxford, Belal Nazar, who is currently my student, Anthony Delin, who was a postdoc at Technion, and Gabi Tzofrir, who is a postdoc at the Simon Center now and is coming back to Israel as a faculty this year. And I will also mention some work in progress or to appear together with mainly with Hitchell Kim and some other collaborators. So please stop me at any time and ask questions and so on. Okay, so the basic topic of the talk will be to understand various aspects of renormalization group flows in a very particular way. So here is the usual way we understand RG flows. You start from some quantum field theory, it might be a conformal field theory, an effective field theory. In UV, you deform it by some relevant operator and you flow to some different quantum field theory in the infrared. And when we study such a renormalization group flow, we are studying it usually by fixing a space-time dimension D. Yet another way to study RG flows is as follows. One can start it from a QFT in a certain number of dimensions, which I will denote here by d tilde. But then instead of turning on a relevant deformation, we place that quantum field theory on some compact space, denoted by this C. And then in the infrared, when we go to scales much lower than the scale set by this compact space, we get effectively a lower dimensional theory, and then we can ask what that quantum field theory is. Is there an effective description of that quantum field theory, and what are the properties? So in today's talk, I will try to give some comments about connecting these two pictures in some kind of common language or common set of things that we can say about these two views of different types of RG flows. So the outline of this talk is as follows. First, I will remind you the basic facts about dualities that most of these things are very, very well known to everybody, but I want to remind some of the very, very basic things. Then we will talk about something I like to call dualities across dimensions. These are, again, this is marrying the two types of renormalization group flows that I mentioned before. We will discuss how one can derive four-dimensional dualities from these across-dimensional dualities or from geometries. We will mention how one can derive dualities in lower dimensions from dualities in higher dimensions. We will discuss a certain interplay between renormalization group flows in different dimensions, inside 6 dimensions and inside 4 dimensions, and between them. We will discuss something I will call 6-dimensional dualities. And finally, I will make some comments on the whole this picture, how the whole this picture, instead of going from higher dimensional to lower dimensions, how it can be understood the other way around by starting from lower dimensions and going to higher dimensions. And I will comment on how this might be related to the very popular subject discussed now, the subject of fractals. Okay, so that will be my plan. So first, let me remind you the basic notion of duality. And here I will discuss what is called infrared duality and UV duality. And later we will encounter something which I will call conformal duality. So infrared duality is this very, very well-known subject, which was studied from the mid-90s, where you have two different quantum field theories, two different descriptions of quantum field theories. These theories are different in the UV. You deform them by some relevant deformation, and they flow to the same theory in the infrared. So for the sake of this talk, it will not be important for me that these are exactly the same theory. I will always assume, though, that they live on the same conformal manifold, that we end up with some family of theories which are continuously related to each other. You can maybe tune the parameters in the UV so you will exactly land on the same theory, but that will not be important for us. So this is the idea of infrared duality. Another basic notion is the notion of UV duality. In UV duality, you start from a single quantum field theory, and you deform it in two different ways and obtain two different quantum field theories in the infrared. Okay, this seems sound like a silly notion. Okay, this is something that is hard to engineer. It's hard to, we don't really understand the physics behind infrared dualities. When we have an infrared duality, it's a non-trivial statement. This seems like a trivial statement. You can start from a single theory, deform it in different ways, and obtain different theories. However, it becomes very useful when this starting theory is not well understood. For example, it's some higher dimensional quantum field theory, which is intrinsically strongly coupled, but then performing two different deformations, you can arrive at, say, weakly coupled theories. And by understanding the properties of these weakly coupled theories, you might be able to understand the starting point. Okay. So here there is again a review, an example of two types of dualities. The first one is extremely well known, and the second is less known. This is example of the UV duality. So the canonical example of infrared duality is the Seiberg duality. It's more than 25 years old. For example, here we have an SUN gauge theory with some number of flavors. This is QFT1. The QFT2 is almost the same theory, but with a different gauge group and maybe some gauge singlet fields. And the claim is that in certain range of parameters, these two theories flow to same interacting CFT in the infrared. Outside of this range of parameters, one still has a non-trivial statement. One of these theories is asymptotically free, another is infrared free. And you can think of the asymptotically free theory as the UV completion of the infrared theory. Okay, this will be important later on. Here is an example of a UV duality. Again, to know something about UV duality, again, this is something which becomes important once one studies higher dimensional theories, where we understand field theories much less well. For example, here, what you can do, you can start in 6 dimensions with a theory which is called 1, 0, dn plus 3, dn plus 3 minimal conformal matter. It's some theory in 6 dimensions, which is strongly coupled. You can engineer it in various ways. And then what you can do, you can deform this theory in 3 different ways, actually in this case. And by deform it, I mean place it on a circle and flow to 5 dimensions. And in 5 dimensions, you can get 3 different weakly coupled descriptions based on different gauge groups. Here, these are simple gauge groups, SUN plus 1 USP2N, and here it's a quiver theory. These theories are different. They're infrared free in 5 dimensions, but they are all UV completed by the same CFT in 6 dimensions. So they're UV dual to each other. Okay, they are different, but they come from the same theory in UV, and by understanding some properties of these theories, one might learn something about the original 6D SCFT. Okay, so these are basic things I wanted to remind you about the dualities. And now I will discuss the first subject of this talk, and this is dualities across dimensions. Okay. Once we understand that there are dualities inside dimensions and that we can go from one dimension to another dimension by dimensional reduction, we can consider a more general setup, where we start from 2 quantum field theories in different number of dimensions. So this QFT1 lives in d tilde dimension, QFT2 lives in d tilde minus delta d dimensions. And then we deform them in different ways. Here we deform by this geometry, placing this theory on compact geometry and maybe doing something else. Here we are turning some relevant deformations. And if we end on the same conformal manifold or with the same theory, we will say that we have a duality across dimensions. Okay. So let me give you some examples of these dualities. Before that, I want to stress something very, very important. So when I say that we have these 2 quantum field theories defined here, this QFT1 and this QFT2, I really mean that we have 2 different descriptions, independent descriptions of these theories. So this can, for example, if we are talking about a theory in 6 dimensions, this might have some brainy construction. This might be some theory defined in terms of the Lagrangian, or you again might have some more abstract description of it. But very importantly, these are independently defined theories. If they are not independently defined, then there is no meaning to them being dual. Again, a duality is something when you have two different descriptions that describe the same physics, in this case in the infrared. It's important for me to mention that because many times when people study compactifications of higher dimensional theories on Riemann surfaces, people are talking about non-Lagrangian CFTs. And what that means is that you can start from some theory in 6 dimensions, for example, which you poorly understand, you put it on some Riemann surface, and you predict an existence of some CFT in lower dimensions. And then since this CFT is not defined in terms of fields in this lower number of dimensions, you call it a non-Lagrangian theory. Okay? So here, what we will do, we will always assume when we will discuss these dualities across dimensions that there is a construction of the theory using this geometric construction, but there is also another construction in the same number of dimensions. In our cases, this will be 4 dimensions in terms of fields. So this CFT that we will obtain will be a Lagrangian theory, and kind of a behind the scene motivation or a conjecture behind this work is that basically there are no non-Lagrangian theories. Every theory that we can construct geometrically, we might be able to construct using fields in the same number of dimensions.
So Shlomo, what about
yes.
kind of this kind of expectation in the higher dimensional theory itself?
That's right. So that's a different thing. So when I'm talking about the conjecture that there are no non-Lagrangian theories, I really mean non-Lagrangian theories in dimensions 4 and lower. Once you go above 4, this becomes trickier. Okay, you cannot write Lagrangians which flow. You cannot start from free fields, turn on relevant deformations, and flow to a non-trivial CFT. Okay, so I'm talking about 4 dimensions and lower. There are some ideas that I will mention in the end related to deconstruction, where you can reverse these flows from higher to lower dimensions. And you can argue in a sense that by starting from Lagrangians in lower dimensions and taking certain limits, you might be able to construct 6-dimensional theories using fields. But it is a trickier statement, and it's not a usual renormalization group flow. Here I'm talking about usual renormalization group flows.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for the question. So let me give you a couple of examples, which also will illustrate very general properties of this construction. So again, I have here this picture where we have a quantum field theory in higher dimensions. And in this talk, this will be typically 6 dimensions. We put this theory on a Riemann surface and go down to 4 dimensions. And here is a 4-dimensional quantum field theory, which flows to the same conformal manifold. This theory might be UV complete in 4 dimensions, or it might be only UV completed in 6 dimensions. So here are 2 examples. We take this 6D SCFT that I mentioned, the particular type of that CFT called D4 minimal conformal matter. This is also sometimes called the E-string theory, and place it on a surface which is a sphere with 3 punctures. The details are not important. It is some 2-dimensional surface. The claim is that the theory you obtain in 4 dimensions is just SU3, SQCD with 6 flavors with no superpotential. The way you argue for this type of across dimensions duality, so this is this QFT2, and this is this QFT1, and this is this deformation, so it is an example of a cross-dimensional duality. The way you argue for it is as you argue for Seiberg dualities. You compute all the possible protected information, for example, anomalies, spectrum of operators, you study deformations of different ways to deform this identification, and you find that all this protected information matches between this construction, and then you conjecture that there is such a duality. Okay, so it's an extremely simple statement.
So Shlomo,
another
can be computed in the 6-dimensional from the 6-dimensional theory.
So what can be computed? You can compute 't-Hooft anomalies. Okay.
Oh, no, sorry.
So you know the anomaly, although you don't know this. Sorry, Abhijit? Yes.
I was asking whether the index can be computed from the 6-dimensional.
This is a good question. The index itself not always can be, almost never can be computed. What you can know is that there exist certain operators. You cannot compute the full index, but you know something about the 6D theory. you know existence of some operators. For example, this particular theory has an E8 global symmetry. So you know that a conserved current for E8 exists in 6 dimensions. You know that the stress energy exists in 6 dimensions. You know some other operators. And then you can ask, okay, I compactify this theory. What becomes of these operators in lower dimensions? Okay, and sometimes doing some Riemann-Roch type of logic, you can predict what you will get in lower dimensions, and then you can look for these operators in this theory.
I see. And these operators can be characterized as them being some particular BPS operators.
Exactly. So you can predict existence of some BPS operators modulo recombinations. Okay. So you do this type of a logic, like in this RG flow, as in any RG flow, things can recombine during the flow. So you cannot predict, you know, that certain operators will exist. You can predict modulo possible recombinations that they will exist.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can check whether you find these things or not.
No, I mean, from superconformal representation theory, they can be characterized in particular type of multiplets up to recombination.
That's right. Okay. That's right. Right. So like long multiplets, you will not see. But short multiplets, again, modular recombination, you will be able to check whether you find or not.
What do the colored squares stand for?
Sorry, say.
What do the colored squares stand for?
Oh, thank you very much for the question. I didn't get into these details, but these are important. So I kind of swipe things under the rug. But when I tell you that I compactify on a sphere with 3 punctures, I need to specify some information about the punctures. So punctures are holes on the Riemann surface, and you need to specify certain boundary conditions at those holes. And there are a variety of choices. And these choices are denoted by having different colors. So these punctures here are not same types of punctures. You specify different boundary conditions at them. And in this field theory that you construct here, when you study the operator, like the global symmetry of this theory and how operators which are charged under these SU2s are charged under other global symmetries, you find that they are charged in a different way. So these are just different types of punctures. I will not go into details of this, but it is important.
So they are charged under different SU2 subgroups of the SU3, right?
No. This SU2 is a global symmetry.
It's not related to the SU3 of the 3.
No, it's not. This SU3 is not important. Think about it abstractly. As a quantum field theory, what is the global symmetry? The global symmetry is SU6 times SU6 times U1. Okay. We break one of the 2 SU6s into 3 SU2s, and we identify them with punctures. But then we have remaining symmetry. It's this SU6 and another 3 U1s. So the baryonic U1s and the 2 U1s which came from breaking the SU6 to SU2s. Now, as I mentioned, the global symmetry in 6 dimensions here is E8, is a rank 8 group. Okay. And this rank E8 group, this SU6 and 3 U1s that we find, is a subgroup of this E8. Okay. And then you will find certain operators here which are charged under this Cartan of this E8 and under this puncture symmetry. But these 3 objects will be charged in a different way.
Okay.
Like you will build the operators, natural operators charged under these SU2s and under those symmetries, and they will be charged in a different way.
Shlomo, what's probably a very stupid question, but
Yes.
If you had a generic non-supersymmetric theory and you put it on a compact manifold, your generic expectation would be that in the lower dimension it would be a massive theory, not a conformal theory.
I don't know what it will be. Yes,
but here you know somehow that the 6-dimensional theory will be conformal in the IR.
Well, you see, this one thing that you will be able to do even there, it's like, again, it's like a usual RG flow. For example, you will be able to compute anomalies in 6D, like 't Hooft anomalies. You place your theory on a Riemann surface, you compute 't Hooft anomalies. If that, in general, I would not expect that the 't Hooft anomalies in lower dimension will be 0. If they are not 0, something has to care them.
Okay, thank you. So the anomalies is that something is happening. Yeah.
Something is happening. I don't know what, but something is happening. So generic, I will actually expect something non-trivial to be there. Maybe this will be free fields, that is okay. But completely massive, something special should happen.
Thank you.
So Shlomo, sorry,
Yes.
maybe a bit tangential, but just related to this remark, can one show using this two anomaly matching argument that you can float non-supersymmetric CFTs in 5 or higher dimensions, 5 and 6 dimensions, by finding, let's say, relevant operators that break supersymmetry, but at the same time make sure that we don't gap it out because of two anomalies? Or maybe this is something that has been looked at also.
So let me understand. So you are talking about 6D and 5D, and starting with how many dimensions?
No, I mean, let's say the same dimension or from 6 to 5. The final one is either 6 or 5.
6D to 6D you cannot flow. This is the paper of Ken, Clay, and Thomas, who showed that there are no non-supersymmetric. Yeah, non-supersymmetric. So with non-supersymmetric, I would say like that. So we know of existence of supersymmetric CFTs in 6 dimensions. Yeah. Then you can ask what happens if you deform them with non-supersymmetric relevant deformations. Then you will flow to something, and you can ask what that is. So with 't-Hooft anomalies, presumably generically there will be some 't-Hooft anomalies, so something has to carry them. But whether it is an interacting CFT or free CFT, that will not tell you, just anomaly computation.
Well, but if it's a free theory, there are only few possibilities, right? I mean, then you can see that the anomalies are not quite adding up the way.
No, but what can happen is that like you start from some symmetry in the UV, then you flow to free theory, and the free theory might have a much bigger symmetry group. So this, if it is free, there can be enhancement of symmetry. So all you can, try to match is embed the symmetries of UV inside the IR and match the anomalies. And that is, that is something which might be possible always to do. Or, I mean, this is something, when you understand that the symmetries might enhance, might emerge, the space of possibilities is huge.
Sorry, right? Are you saying that the field theory in D equal to 6 is free or something?
No. In D equals 6, we know of non-trivial interacting CFTs, which are supersymmetric.
Okay.
We can construct them in string theory. Then there is the question whether non-supersymmetric, non-trivial CFTs exist in 6 dimensions and in 5 dimensions also. And that we don't know. Okay, Abhijit is asking, start from this supersymmetric one and perform a non-supersymmetric deformation. And I'm saying even if the 't-Hooft anomalies are non-trivial, it doesn't tell us that the theory is not free. It might be still free. It might be interacting.
Okay, so the
all
last
you will know it is not gapped.
I didn't quite understand the last point. I thought that if the theory is free, then the anomalies would have to work out in a certain way.
No, but only for a subgroup which you see in the UV.
I see. Okay. Okay, maybe we can talk about this later.
If a theory is free, how can you have anomalies? Because if you don't have interactions, you don't have a triangle or any in your hexagon diagrams or any of that sort, right?
No, you can have you can compute these anomalies in free theory. You just have conserved currents and you compute these anomalies.
These are 't-Hooft anomalies.
So that's right.
Yeah, so the global symmetry.
Right. Okay. So thank you very much for all the questions. Please ask if anything is bothering here. So here is another example. Here I start from a different 6D theory, just a different theory in this family of D-type conformal matter. And the claim is that, again, we get a simple theory in 4 dimensions. Here it's an SU5 gauge theory with an F equals 10, but there is a superpotential, and this superpotential is actually irrelevant. Okay. So the way to think about this theory is that this is an effective theory in 4 dimensions. You have this irrelevant deformation, which goes to 0 when we go to the infrared, and one can think of the 6D theory as UV completing this type of an interaction. Okay, so we can have completely UV complete theory in 4 dimensions, or we can have this weirder irrelevant deformations, and in some cases even infrared-free gauge groups. Here the gauge dynamics is UV free, is asymptotically free, but the superpotential is infrared-free. It's irrelevant. Okay?
Sorry, Shlomo,
so
I
there
didn't understand this
yes.
point. So, I mean, when you say that the QFT2 is this theory with an irrelevant potential, superpotential,
Yes, right.
It will flow to this theory where this superpotential is not there, right?
Exactly, yes.
So you might as well say that the QFT2 did not have any superpotential to begin with, or that.
Well, so
that...
it's an important point. So why do I know that this superpotential is there, or at least at some scale before? Like with cyber duality, the statement of a duality is not only about the fixed point. It's about vicinity of the fixed point. What happens just before you hit this CFT. So the way we know that this superpotential exists is that we need it to break certain symmetries. They might emerge, these symmetries might accidentally emerge at the fixed point, okay, once you hit it here, but the statement of this across-dimensional duality is, is some vicinity of this fixed point before you hit it.
But why do I care about those symmetries? If I want to produce a QFT2 candidate which will flow to the CFT that is obtained by the QFT1.
That I agree. But the statement will be that if you remove this superpotential,
yeah,
okay, that is you are describing direct, like you are not describing anything in the vicinity.
Okay, I see.
You are starting from some theory which will flow to the same fixed point, but in the vicinity of that fixed point, it will be different. The claim is that with this superpotential in the vicinity of the fixed point, before you hit it, you still have a duality.
I see. So in some sense, your QFT1 arrow and QFT2 arrow are kind of merging.
Exactly. Like, there is some fuzzy region here where the theories agree. Okay. Once you go high enough in the RG flow, they will not agree. Okay. But in the vicinity of the fixed point, they should agree. The physics should agree.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. So, and again, I want to
have another question.
Yes. Yes.
Are you saying that the D equal to 6 theory RG flows to the D equal to 4 theory and to the D equal to 2 theory?
To the D equals to 4, that's right. So you start from the 6D theory, you put it on a compact space, okay, and then this space has some size. You go to energies which are much lower than the 1 over the size of this geometry, and then you effectively have a 4-dimensional theory.
Okay.
I mean, you can perform the same type of a procedure going to lower dimensions. You can put it on a 4-manifold, 3-manifold, and people have done it. In this talk, I will only discuss going from 6 to 4. Okay, so again, the physics that we can obtain in 4 dimensions can be different. It doesn't have to be a CFT in the usual sense. It can be also something which has these irrelevant deformations. And again, in some cases, the gauge groups can be infrared free. Okay. Here is yet another example, and this is something novel that we're discussing with Hitchell, and hopefully it will be out soon. Surprisingly, here I have described the compactification on a very particular geometry on a 3-punctured sphere. But actually, you can show that compactifying this whole family of theories on generic spheres with many types of numbers of punctures, arbitrary number of punctures, with a very particular flux that I don't get into, you again get a very simple theory. It's a simple gauge theory with certain amount of matter. So the rank of the gauge theory depends on the information of the 6D theory, the number of punctures, and also the matter depends on it. And for all of these choices, you get this very simple theory. Okay? In particular, you can discuss what is called 3-punctured spheres, so Technions with 3 maximal punctures. So you can compactify on a sphere with 3 types of punctures, which are very special. They are called maximal, and the reason what is special about the maximal punctures is if you have 2 surfaces with maximal punctures, you can glue them together along these punctures to obtain theory corresponding to a more general surface. For example, gluing two such things together, you can obtain a theory corresponding to a four-punctured sphere, and so on. I want to stress that these constructions are completely Lagrangian. Okay, these are simple Lagrangians. All the symmetries of the theory are manifest, and you gauge manifest symmetries. And in this way, you can obtain these across-dimensional dualities for compactifications on any Riemann surface for this large family of QFTs. Okay, so there are many theories you can start with in 6 dimensions, and you can obtain a very explicit across-dimensional duality for compactifications on any surface. Okay, so here is an example. So you can take in the previous slide a very particular number of punctures, which is related to this genus G, and genus G is the genus of the surface on which you want to compactify your theory. And then you take two such theories with a lot of punctures, with G+1 punctures, and you glue them together, and you obtain a theory which would correspond to this genus G surface. And it's again a very simple vanilla gauge theory. And the statement is that these two theories are across-dimension dual to each other. Yes, sorry.
So is the understanding that the gluing is done along the punctures or something?
Exactly. So let me say a couple of more words about the puncture. So again, the punctures are holes on the Riemann surface. And geometrically, what you do, you glue two surfaces along these holes. You kind of identify holes of the two theories. Field theoretically, what you do, when you have such a hole, you can think of it, you can look at the vicinity of this hole, and then you have a natural circle. So the way to think about the punctures is to go from 6 dimensions to 5 dimensions. And in 5 dimensions, in nice situations, these 6-dimensional theories will have a gauge theory description. And then what you do when you set boundary conditions at these holes, you basically set boundary conditions for these 5-dimensional fields. In particular, for example, you can set Dirichlet boundary conditions for the gauge fields in 5 dimensions. And this freezes the 5-dimensional gauge symmetry at the boundary. And then when you glue two theories together along the puncture, you undo this boundary condition. So you gauge this symmetry at the boundaries. So that's why gluing corresponds to gauging certain symmetries which are associated to the punctures. Does this answer the question?
I mean, I don't understand how gauging the symmetry would correspond to the gluing procedure, but maybe that's more intricate. I mean, that's
that's just you have a surface. You have a surface with a puncture, and by puncture I mean that you put some boundary condition at the puncture. Now you want to undo this procedure. You want to glue two punctures together and undo the boundary conditions. Yeah. The boundary conditions are freezing the gauge fields at the boundary. So now we make them dynamical again. So that will correspond to gauging. I mean, there are other things that one can do. For example, turn on certain superpotentials and sometimes add certain fields, but this is the basic logic.
Okay, good.
Okay. So then we have this across-dimensional duality, number 1. We can glue these two spheres together and obtain a theory corresponding to the surface. We can do it in many other ways. Once we can take not two spheres with G+1 punctures, but say many spheres with 3 punctures and glue them together. For example, in such a way, you have a 3-punctured sphere, and then you start gluing them together in such a way. Okay, this is a different way to construct the same type of surface. And in this particular case, when n equals 1, you will obtain this very nice and simple quiver, which has this beautiful shape. And this is another across-dimensional dual of this construction. Okay, and since these are both across-dimensional dual to the same theory, they are dual to each other directly in 4 dimensions. So these are 2 different gauge theories in 4 dimensions, which have to describe the same physics.
And now you can compare their indices directly in 4 dimensions.
And now you can compare everything. Right. You can compare indices, other partition functions. In principle, higher form symmetries. All the structures should match. That's right. Okay. So this is an example on the previous slide how we can derive in-dimensional dualities from a cross-dimensional duality. So sometimes we can build the same type of theories, the different duals across dimensions for the same 6-dimensional construction, and we can forget about the higher dimensional origin of this construction and discuss these theories in, say, 4 dimensions, and they have to be dual to each other. So the basic logic of this deriving dualities from geometry is as follows. It follows this factorization property. So if we compactify on some Riemann surface in this case, and we can think of this Riemann surface as composed of smaller pieces, like some pair of pants decomposition or something else, we can break the same Riemann surface in different ways into components. And if we understand the cross-dimensional duals of the components, then the following statement holds. The cross-dimensional dual of a theory, when we compactify, some 6D theory on a certain Riemann surface, is given by something which I call here this product of 4-dimensional theories corresponding to the pieces. And by this product, I mean some QFT operation, superpotentials, gauging, and so on that we discussed before. Okay. And if we can break the same Riemann surface into pieces in different ways, we can then have different duality frames directly in 4 dimensions. Okay, and what we had on the previous slide is an example of that. Okay, so here is, let me give you several more examples of this effect. For example, we can start from the same D4 minimal conformal matter, compactify it on a genus 2 surface, and we can break this genus 2 surface to pieces in different ways. For example, we can break it in such a way into 3 punctured spheres. You can construct a cross-dimensional dual of this theory. You get such a quiver theory. Or you can break the genus 2 in a different way into 3 punctured spheres, and then the theory that you will obtain will look different. These 2 theories have different matter content. There are fields here in 6-dimensional representation, in a symmetric representation of the SU3 gauge groups. The number of fundamentals is different, but if this construction of a cross-dimensional dualities is consistent, these 2 theories have to be the same. In this particular case, both of these theories are conformal. They don't flow. They are like n equals 4. They have exactly marginal deformations which connect smoothly to the free point. You can just tune some exactly marginal coupling and make both of these theories exactly conformal. Okay, so yes.
I was wondering if you now consider punctures on these surfaces, whether a sort of a what is that called, that in the duality between the T channel and the S channel, crossing symmetry, whether some sort of crossing symmetry can be derived if you kind of insert vertex operators or puncture.
That's right. Yeah, you are right. So this is, you can ask whether this is a basic kind of a duality, but a more basic thing maybe will be to consider a 4-punctured sphere.
Yeah, that's what.
And then you can either cut it this way or this way.
Yeah.
And if you can prove that no matter how you cut, you get the same theory, then this type of a duality will follow from it. You are absolutely right. You can do it here. You can consider this 4-punctured sphere and discuss these types of dualities.
Yeah.
You will obtain certain dualities, but I've chosen to present this duality because it's simpler than actually this duality in this case. For example, this duality will not be a conformal duality in this case. Yeah. But here you get a conformal duality. But you are absolutely right. This is a more basic statement.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. So this is an example of a duality. It looks like a novel duality. Maybe if you were alive in the 90s, you haven't seen this type of a duality, but it's actually not new. You can prove this duality using various dualities that were known in the 90s. Maybe it's a conformal duality. It's kind of a very symmetric, nice duality, but it is provable from known dualities. And it's important that many of the well-known dualities can have this geometric understanding. And in 2018, when I visited TIFR, I discussed this duality, for example, in detail. So say you take the same type of a theory, D4 conformal matter, and compactify it on a sphere with 2 punctures on type of a tube. This theory turns out to be just a West-Zumino model. Then you can glue 2 such things together, and you will again obtain a sphere with 2 punctures. When you compactify from 6 dimensions, you can also turn on background fields for global symmetry in 6 dimensions, some fluxes supported on the surface. And so there is some vector of fluxes you associate to the surface. And then when you glue things together, you need to add these vectors of fluxes. So naively, this theory, when you take 2 such theories and glue them together, you obtain a theory corresponding to the same geometry, but a different value of flux. But it turns out that this value of flux is equivalent to the flux you started with for each one of the pieces. Okay, it's just you view these fluxes as something inside the global symmetry in 6D, which is E8, and then there are different ways to embed the same symmetry. In this case, it's E7 times E1 inside E8, and then you get different vectors of fluxes which are equivalent to each other. Since these are equivalent geometric information, you expect that this theory will be equivalent to this theory once you compactify. And following these rules of the game, the theory which is written here is a cross-dimensional to this gauge theory. And this, as I mentioned, is just a West-Zumino model. And these 2 are dual to each other, have to be equivalent. And this is just a statement of a simple Seiberg duality. Okay? So many known Seiberg dualities can be phrased in this geometrical language. Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. So another thing I want to mention is that in the beginning, I have mentioned that there are these weird UV dualities. Okay, that you, in particular in 5 dimensions, that you can have different 5-dimensional theories, which are UV completed by the same 6-dimensional theory. And you can ask whether you can derive some interesting information about 4-dimensional physics by understanding these 5-dimensional dualities, UV dualities, which are in a sense very weird. And the answer is that you can do that. And the way that that this goes is what exactly we mean by gluing surfaces together. As I mentioned, punctures are defined through the 5-dimensional reduction, through some, there is a symmetry associated to the puncture, which is a 5-dimensional gauge group. If there are different gauge groups that we can obtain by doing different compactification to 5 dimensions, there might be different symmetries, different types of punctures, which with different symmetries which are associated to them. And then we can, glue surfaces together by gauging these symmetries, these different types of symmetries. So here is an example of a duality you can find in 4 dimensions with SU3 gauge group with some particular matter. And here there is an SU2 cubed gauge theory. And these 2 are infrared dual to each other. And the way you derive this duality is, again, just by understanding that there are 5-dimensional dualities, UV dualities. And one can derive many, many types of dualities in 4 dimensions from 5-dimensional UV dualities. These are infrared dualities, but what leads to them are 5-dimensional UV dualities. So there are many ways in which things can happen. Okay, and this particular theory corresponds to torus with 1 puncture. So you construct this torus by cutting it into 3 punctured sphere, but when you cut, you create different types of punctures. One thing that I want to mention that, yes?
I was just wondering, what happens, I mean, as you just said that on a sphere, when you have 4 punctures, it gives rise to crossing symmetry. What happens when you have punctures on these surfaces and you have these duals with each other? What
these duals? So this is just, you take this surface, this torus with 1 puncture, and you cut it into 3 punctured sphere. But then you need to specify what does it mean to cut it? Like what type of puncture you will get here.
Okay.
And in this particular case, you can have different types of punctures.
Yeah.
I'm a bit oversimplifying, but that's how it goes. Like what you will get before you glue things together might be different.
Yeah. So I mean, the way you cut that, the handle there, depending on the symmetry, it will be different sort of punctures, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, and then like you might be able to understand what a field theory is, when you have a 3-puncture sphere with this, novel types of punctures, and depending on punctures, it will be different theory. But when you glue things together, you obtain the same surface in 2 ways, so they better be the same.
Yeah,
so that's how you obtain this type of duality.
So that's how you obtain this. Okay.
So Shlomo, one question. When
Yes.
you get n=1 theories by compactifying, let's say 60 theory on some surface,
Yes.
In this way, can one get n=1 theories without exactly marginal deformations also?
Definitely. Yes.
And then what is the
Sorry. You can, but it is hard. Sorry. Yes. Continue.
And then what does the complex structure parameter of the surface?
Right. So for an example of such a compactification is a sphere with no punctures. That's question.
No, I meant
so sphere with no punctures. Often people say that it is a trivial theory, but it doesn't have to be trivial because you can turn on this flux. So with generic flux, when you compactify on sphere without punctures, you can get a non-trivial theory, and you don't expect a complex structure moduli to be there because this theory doesn't have that.
Right. No, but I meant for a surface with a modulus, then you would get
then you would
that
expect
modulus space as the parameter space of the theory. Always.
Right. That's also a tricky question. So the statement is like that. If you compactify on a generic Riemann surface, you expect to have exactly marginal deformations corresponding to complex structure moduli. For low values of flux and low values of genus, it can happen that you will not see exactly marginal deformations that you expect. The reason is like that. You can ask, where do the complex structure moduli come from? Like, these are operators in 4D, where do they come from in 6D? And they come from compactification of stress energy tensor. You take a stress energy tensor in 6 dimensions, you do a Riemann Roch, reduction of that, and you get the 3G minus 3 plus S exactly marginal operators. But there might be other operators that contribute, that might recombine with these operators. Generically, it doesn't happen. But for some special cases, that might happen.
Yeah.
So for example, when you compactify on a torus, it's actually, generically, you don't see the complex structure modulus of the torus. Okay.
Do not see it.
You don't. Typically, you don't see it. Like n=4 is special.
I thought generically recombination does not happen, you're saying.
Yes, but for unless you look on low genus, for example, genus 1, then special things might happen. We don't understand it well. The guess is that where local operators in 4D come from in 6D. So they can come from local operators in 6D, like stress energy tensor, or they can come from extended operators, which say wrap this surface. Okay, and naively, I would expect that these operators which wrap the Riemann surface to get higher quantum numbers when you wrap them on higher genus surfaces. I don't have a good argument for that, but that's a naive expectation. Okay, and then for low genus, they might interfere with these simple operators that you expect.
So I was wondering if if one is given a 4D n=1 theory with some exactly marginal deformation, can one anticipate a geometric origin in the higher dimensional theory by basically looking at, let's say, the modulus space, the coupling space of that theory? But of course, that would be difficult. But at least one can look at the cusps or degeneration points, which would basically end up being the number of dual descriptions. Right?
That's right. So I think that's a big open question that they want to start working at some point. So, like, for example, here I mentioned that these are conformal theories. These two theories correspond to different cusps on the conformal manifold. So what is this conformal manifold? I mean, can we understand these different cusps? Like, is there a duality group? What is the structure of this conformal manifold?
Yeah. So ideally, one would like to show that it is the same as that of the Teichmüller space of the genus 2.
Exactly. So actually, in this case, it's much more interesting. But naively, this should be a Teichmuller space of genus 2 surface. Yes.
Okay.
Why it is more interesting, I will mention in the end. But generically, you are right. Yes.
Sorry, what's the relationship between cusps and conformal manifolds?
So what happens in the there is a conformal manifold here, and naively, what we will expect to have here, naively, we expect here to have like 3G minus 3 plus S dimensional conformal manifold. Here, G is equal to, and we don't have puncture, so we'll expect a 3-dimensional conformal manifold. Now, what happened? We should expect like certain limits in this conformal manifold where this surface degenerates. Like you break this surface into 3 punctured spheres. In field theory, there might be something special happening. For example, it might correspond to these gauge couplings becoming free. Okay, and these are special points on the conformal manifolds.
Okay.
It's much trickier in general because in general, we describe these conformal manifolds using strongly coupled theories, and then what these cusps would correspond to is much trickier to understand. But in these conformal cases, like n equals 4 or like these ones, we do expect to have some cusps. We can just look at these theories and we can see that we have cusps. In the sense, for example, that we can define Zamolodchikov metric on a conformal manifold and study its properties. Okay. Okay. So another thing I want to stress that I was saying that we can get a lot of known dualities from these geometrical constructions, and I would say with some measure, we can find most of the dualities that we know using these geometrical constructions, but definitely not all. For example, one very notable exception is what is called Kutasov-Schwimmer types of dualities. These are SQCDs with adjoint fields with some superpotentials for these adjoint fields, and I don't know how to engineer them geometrically. I think that would be very interesting. And then also in recent years, we have discovered other types of dualities using various methods, which we also don't know how to engineer them. For example, here is a triality, a very simple triality, where we have different gauge theories with different matter contents. All of these 3 theories are conformal, like n equals 4. And you can match all the possible protected information between them. So there is a lot of evidence that all of these theories are basically the same, but we don't know how to understand these types of dualities.
Shlomo,
yes?
This Kutasov-Schwimmer dualities, isn't there this brain, this thing argument also?
Yes, so some of these dualities have different, like this has a brain realization, so we can explain it with brains. But I don't have an explanation.
Somehow promoting it to some geometric M theory picture is difficult. Yes.
I don't know how to do that. I think there should be a possibility. I discussed it with various people various times, but it never materialized. I think it will be very interesting because these dualities have a lot of puzzles. Some things work and some things don't really work. People like, for example, if one studies moduli spaces of these theories, naively you study like what are the various branches, what are the moduli spaces, and naively they don't match in some examples. And then you say that there are quantum constraints, like people said various words, basically meaning that we don't understand what is happening. So, understanding these types of dualities, maybe they are wrong, for example. Maybe they are, at least some of them, maybe they are wrong. I mean, we don't understand them well. So embedding them in some geometric, brain constructions are nice, but they're pictures encoding what we already know in some sense. Sometimes we can derive new things, but
no. But I meant, there is you can take it seriously and promote it to M5 brains.
Yes, so that would be interesting to do. I don't know how to do it. I think it is interesting.
Okay.
Okay, so maybe I should ask this at the end, but I want to ask this now. Can you look upon the thing that I was talking about earlier, the punctures, 4 punctures on the 2 ways of delineating the surfaces, can you look upon it as having loop exchanges? I mean, between instead of tree-level exchanges, can you look upon the genus 2 surfaces as being two loop exchanges between four vertex operators in two different ways? And there can that be a sort of a duality be established between
I'm not sure. So you are saying that there are things that you can say about genus 2, which are not
in general, if you have two-dimensional genus 2 surfaces, if you consider them to be as world sheets, string theory world sheets, I mean the crossing symmetry, the crossing symmetry relation comes from the sphere amplitude by considering it to be a world sheet. I mean, it's manifestly crossing symmetry because it's a Virasoro amplitude is manifestly crossing symmetry. So, in the same sense, can you look upon this thing as being the exchange of loops instead of just trees, since genus 2 surfaces is generically a two loop. I mean, you can decompose the genus 2 surfaces in terms of two loops of particles.
These are not dynamical surfaces. These are just fixed surfaces. Nothing is happening. Nothing is getting exchanged. So, sorry, Shlomo, maybe you can go ahead and answer, or maybe we can postpone this question later.
I'm not sure I understand this question fully. I'm just, it's as Abhijit said, these are not dynamical things. The basic statement is that you can start from 4-punctured sphere, so it's something like that, which has to be crossing symmetric, and then you can do two things. You can glue things this way or glue things this way. You should obtain the same thing.
No, I mean, you have this genus 2 surface, right?
Yes.
In the same way that the sphere, can be decomposed into these two diagrams, this T channel and S channel diagram.
Yes.
I was just wondering whether this two genus 2 surface can be decomposed into diagrams where you have exchanges of two loops instead of, I mean, if you had a single loop, then it could have been thought of as being the exchange of a single loop in either the T channel or the S channel, right? In the same sense as the sphere.
Oh, you are saying like looking on A cycle or B cycle. That's, I think so. There is something to it. For example, one thing you can do is study line operators in these theories. Okay, and the line operators, they actually correspond to some branes in 6-dimensional language that you wrap on these surfaces and become lines in lower dimension. So you can do something like that or something like this. And these correspond to different lines, like, for example, Wilson lines or 't Hooft lines. So I think, like, an answer to your question is that there is a more refined thing to check, is how line operators behave under these dualities. And then looking on different cycles, it's not, there has to be some mapping between these extended objects. And you can understand them as wrapping the cycles. So in n=4, this is that, like there are 't Hooft lines and Wilson lines, and this as duality exchanges these two cycles, and then things need to match to map to each other.
Okay. Anyway, you can consider it to be something to be thought of.
Yes. Okay. And finally, let me mention another example. So these are field theoretic types of dualities. Here is another duality. So there is a gauge theory, a very simple gauge theory. It says an SU4 gauge theory with two antisymmetrics and some number of fundamentals, and gauge singlet field with some superpotential. And the claim is that this is infrared dual to some other theory, which is called E6 Minahan-Nemeshansky theory with n=2 supersymmetry. It has various constructions. So, for example, you can construct them this theory in 6 dimensions in certain starting from 6 dimensions in certain ways. And the statement is that this theory is across dimension, in dimensions dual to this type of theory, but why we don't understand. Okay, unlike other type of constructions that we discussed, there is some kind of a systematic understanding. This is kind of a standalone observation. We don't understand why it is true. So there are many things that we don't understand, and there are many things that we understand systematically. Okay. So let me now mention how I'm severely over time. I was told in the beginning that I can go forever, but please let me know if that is not true.
Sorry, Shlomo, correct. One quick thing before you move on. You were looking at these theories with 8 supercharges in 6 dimensions and compactifying on Riemann surfaces. There are plenty of such theories. Is that right?
Yes. Yes. So
do each of these theories give rise to some identifiable four-dimensional dualities? Or
not all of them. That is a program that basically part of the program. I want to identify all of these cross-dimensional dualities. Here I discuss mainly this family, this infinite family of theories, which are called dn plus 3, dn plus 3, minimal conformal matter, and there we basically now understand everything. But there are many more theories. For some we understand, for some we don't understand. Notably, for example, for 2,0, which is like the original example studied by Gayotto, we don't understand the cross-dimensional dualities. Like for some examples, so this is an example of like this is 6-Minahan-Meshansky theory can be engineered starting from 2,0, and here is a cross-dimensional dual of it. But in general, start from some 2,0 theory, compactify it on some surface. We can predict existence of some CFT, but we don't have a description of that CFT directly in 4D. So for some families of 6D theories, we know things, for some we don't. And for some families of 6D theories, we know compactifications on some manifolds, but not on generic ones.
And would you say that for most theories, you don't know what four-dimensional descriptions you get?
Yes,
yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
There are systematic ways to discuss certain things. I will mention them a little bit later on, but yes, out of this infinity, we know, depends on how you count. We know examples, for infinite number of, there is like countable set of 6D theories, and for countable infinity, we know what to do, but we're still missing most of the,
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So let me mention here another thing, and this is dualities from dualities. So another thing that you can do is not going to 6 dimensions.
Sorry, Shlomo, just one.
Yes.
So are there examples where from 2 different 6D theories when you
Yes, I will mention it.
Okay.
Very excellent point. Hold it for a little bit. Yes.
Yeah.
Just to say now, I would call such a situation a 6D duality. I will get to it very soon. Okay. Hopefully. So instead of going across dimensions, starting from theories and compactifying in different ways and obtaining different types of dualities, you can ask the following question. Say you have a duality, say in 4 dimensions, and you want to kind of dimensionally reduce these dualities to lower dimensions. For example, you can want to take these 2 theories on a circle and go from 4 dimensions to 3 dimensions. If you have a 4-dimensional duality, will it lead to a 3-dimensional duality? And the answer is yes. And one of the people who studied this was Abhijit, long time ago. And the answer is that you can do that, but there are various tricky points. For example, this is a well-known 4-dimensional cyber-like duality with USP gauge groups, and the dual is almost the same, but with some shift of the rank. If you go to 3 dimensions, you obtain almost the same type of a duality, but with a different shift of a rank and different type of a superpotential. And there is a systematic way to understand these differences. Basically, you really need to go into details how you dimensionally reduce things. One thing which is tricky in these dimensional reductions, for example, here, is that some symmetries don't exist. If you write some Lagrangian with certain fields, some symmetries don't exist here because they're broken by anomalies. The same anomalies don't exist in 3 dimensions, so there has to be something else which breaks the symmetries. And what happens in this dimensional reduction is that you generate certain tricky superpotentials involving monopole operators which break the symmetries. So this is one thing I wanted to mention about deriving the dualities from dualities. And the reason I want to mention is that naively, again, say if you are interested in 3D dualities, we can trace many of them to 4-dimensional dualities using these types of procedures. But then there are very beautiful dualities in lower dimensions which go under the name of mirror symmetry. Okay, these dualities happen in theories which have more supersymmetry, say n=4 supersymmetry in 3 dimensions. And the nice feature about this mirror symmetry duality is that the R symmetry group is very special. It has these 2 SU2 factors. And then in these mirror dualities, the 2 objects, the Higgs branch and the Coulomb branch that you have, are interchanged. Say a Higgs branch of one in one dual frame becomes the Coulomb branch in the other. Okay, and this is something which is hard to imagine how you lift to higher dimensions, because even with 8 supercharges in 4 dimensions, the n=2 supersymmetry doesn't have the same R symmetry group. It is only SU2 times U1, so you wouldn't expect to be able to exchange these 2 objects. Here is an example of a mirror symmetry in 4 dimensions. This is the famous TSUN theory derived by Gayotto and Witten as a theory living on a domain wall between 2 n=4 theories related by S duality. In 3 dimensions, this is the field theoretic description of it. So each group here is a U-type gauge group. So there is an SUN gauge symmetry rotating the Higgs branch, but then there are a lot of topological symmetries, topological U1 symmetries for each factor of this U type of gauge group. And a lot of U1 symmetries actually combine in the infrared into an additional factor of SUN global symmetry. And you can think of it as rotating the Coulomb branch. And the mirror symmetry, this theory is actually self-dual under mirror symmetry. And under that mirror symmetry, the 2 types of operators, the monopole operators and the usual composite operators built from usual fields, they're exchanged between each other. So the question is, can you lift this type of duality to higher dimensions? So the idea again of this talk is that everything is liftable to higher dimensions, but here is something weird. It looks special to lower dimensions. Can you lift this thing to higher dimensions? And the answer turns out to be yes. And it is again part of a bigger story, and I will mention it a little bit. And it is a very weird answer. So here is a theory which you can construct in 4 dimensions. It has USP types of gauge groups. It again has this nested structure of bigger gauge groups and then smaller ones, but it doesn't, it looks rather different. It's USP gauge groups and there is some additional matter. When you study this theory, it has a USP2n global symmetry and then a lot of SU2 factors of global symmetry. It so happens that you can show that in the infrared, all these SU2s also enhance to USP. So this theory is in 4 dimensions. It has 2 USP symmetries. One of them is non-trivial. It is emergent in the infrared. And you can show that actually this theory is self-dual, such that these 2 symmetries are exchangeable. And what you can show that dimensionally reducing this theory to 3 dimensions and doing some relevant deformation, you can actually end with this type of theory. This theory has n=4 in 4 dimensions. Sorry, in 3 dimensions. This theory has only n=1 in 4 dimensions, but performing this dimensional reduction to 3 dimensions and doing certain deformation, supersymmetry can emerge in 3 dimensions. Okay, so even things which don't look like they are liftable to higher dimensions, often they are, although in a very tricky way. And the way we have obtained this type of lift of mirror symmetry was by studying mass literature. Okay, there is a mathematician called Eric Rines, and he knows physics much more than he is aware of. Okay, For example, he studies various identities of special functions, which can be translated into physical statements. And once you read his papers and translate these statements, you can arrive at these very weird types of dualities, which have deep physics underlying them. And actually, this type of a theory can be also understood by matching anomalies and other protected properties to compactifications of a 6D theory. This theory you obtain if you compactify a higher rank E-string theory. It's another type of a 6D family of 6D theories on a two-punctured sphere. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
When you go from the n equal to 1 to the in 4 dimensions to n equal to 4 in 3 dimensions,
yes.
So essentially, if you take the super space kind of point of view, then in 4 dimensions, you have a certain set of Grassmann numbers. And when you compactify to 3 dimensions, since they remain the same, how do the extra Grassmann numbers arise in the 3D space?
Yes, it's a tricky thing. It's like any symmetry that when you flow, when you study energy flow, symmetry can emerge in the infrared. Usually it happens in a non-trivial way. So here it's a non-trivial statement. It's hard to study it, but the statement is that there is an emergence of supersymmetry. Like in the UV, you don't have this symmetry. But once you end up at the fixed point in the infrared, you have it. Sometimes you can trace, like, for example, what can happen when you flow, quantum numbers of various operators change during the flow. And once some operators might have different quantum numbers, like say scaling dimensions and so on in the UV, but once you end up at the fixed point, things align and you get more symmetry. So sometimes you can trace, where the extra supercurrents come from in the infrared. Where were they in the UV? Okay,
no,
what type of operators they were?
No, my point of view is, if you consider it from the super space point of view, if you write in terms of super potentials and things of that
right.
kind, in the n equal to 1 manifestly supersymmetric language.
Yes.
And then when you go to the 3D space and you write it in terms of the manifestly n equal to 4 supersymmetric.
No, that you cannot do because you don't have the n equals 4. Like manifestly, you will have n equal 2.
N equals 2.
Right. So the same amount of supersymmetry. And then after the deformations, the extra supersymmetry will emerge. In this particular case, actually, you can really show, you can start from this quiver, dimensionally reduce it to 3D to obtain an n equal 2 theory. And then you perform certain deformations. For example, you will break these USP gauge groups, you will Higgs them down to UN gauge groups. And then you can actually see in the Lagrangian that, you get n equals 4 supersymmetry. But in general, this is something which is hard to study. For example, another example of that I mentioned here, this theory is an n equal 1 gauge theory in 4 dimensions, but the claim is that it flows to n equal 2 CFT in 4 dimensions. It's 4 to 4 flow, it's not across dimensions.
So is the sense that these extra fermionic dimensions arise in the same sense that a diamond, you have dimensions arising in ADS-CFT kind of duality or something like that? Instead of a bosonic dimension, a fermionic dimension is arising because of the duality, something of that sort?
I'm not sure I fully understand the
Even
analogy,
I'm not sure I fully understand my question, but I'm just wondering whether, in ADS-CFT, you have, when you have this conformal field theory, and you go to the supergravity picture, it's of a different dimension. So a bosonic dimension automatically, or you can say 6 extra dimensions arise out of the n equal to 4. In n equal to 4 super.
Sorry, can we keep the questions for later on, maybe, because it's already getting quite late.
Okay.
So maybe we should let the speaker finish, and then at the end we can ask some questions. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I will be happy to discuss later on. Okay.
Okay.
So we can also lift the mirror symmetry to 4 dimensions. And here, let me go back to this cyber duality that one can derive from higher dimensions. And as I mentioned, this weird theory also corresponds to compactifications of 6-dimensional theory. It has 2 USP factors. So let me formally write it as 2 factors of USP with some wiggly line between them. By this wiggly line, I mean all this mess that happens there, all these various fields. And exactly in the same way as for the E string that we mentioned before, you can take these two punctured spheres, glue them together. The flux turns out to be equivalent before and after gluing. So there has to be a duality of this sort. Like gluing 2 such theories together is equivalent to the same theory, to 1 copy of this theory you started with. And this is, again, a duality that you can check directly in 4 dimensions. Again, following from this consistency, in a degenerate case, when n equals 1, this weird theory here becomes just a bifundamental. Basically, only this guy survives. So it becomes a very simple theory. But this is a generalization, a wild generalization of this vanilla simple Seiberg duality as confining Seiberg duality. Okay, again, this appeared in the math paper of Rines long ago, and this has this physical interpretation. In a series of works, Sara Pasquetti with collaborators actually managed to prove this very, very weird looking type of a duality, again, which follows from geometry, if you wish, using vanilla interligator-Puyo sequences of interligator-Puyo types of dualities, which were known from the 90s. Okay, by using them in a very clever way, you can argue that this duality has to be correct. Another thing that I want to mention is the relation between 6D flows and 4D flows. And this is actually a way to derive various cross-dimensional dualities systematically. I just want to mention the basic idea. Okay. The question you can ask is that some theories in 6 dimensions, here QFT1 and QFT2 are in 6 dimensions, are related to each other by turning on vacuum expectation values to some operators in 6D. So you can start from this theory, turn on a VF to some operator, and end up with some other CFT. Okay. Now you can compactify, say, this QFT down to 4 dimensions on some Riemann surface. And you can ask yourself, is there a way to form such type of a commuting diagram? First, flow with the vacuum expectation value in 6D, then compactify on some surface down to 4D, or first compactify to 4D, and then flow with vacuum expectation value in 4D to some theory, and ending up at this with the same theory in 4 dimensions. Okay, it's easy to identify this part of the diagram. So you give a VF to some operator here, you can find a similar operator in 4 dimensions, basically by comparing the charges of the operator. But the surprise is on this side. So the bottom line is, if you compactify here on some Riemann surface, here you should compactify on the same Riemann surface, but you might need extra punctures. Okay? And the extra punctures are related to various fluxes you turn on when you compactify. I can get, maybe if somebody is interested after the talk, I can get into the details, but the main point is, if you understand the compactification of this quantum field theory, say on 2 punctured spheres, you can understand compactification of this quantum field theories on spheres with more than 2 punctures. And this is interesting because once you understand compactifications on surfaces with more than 2 punctures, you can build other surfaces, other topologies from it. Okay? So if you understand sequences of compactifications on spheres with 2 punctures, you might be able to derive compactifications on generic surfaces by understanding interplays of flows, wave flows in 6D and 4D and compactifications. And this can be made very, very systematic.
And
Okay.
Once you have
Yes.
more punctures, you have more ways of gluing also, right? Higher genera surfaces.
Yes, exactly. Once you understand these types of things, if these punctures are generic enough, you can start gluing into closed Riemann surfaces. So if you are here, you're kind of stuck with spheres with 2 punctures and tori. But once you can relate this different compactification with these flows, you have more punctures, and you can at least consider tori with more punctures. And in nice situations, when these punctures are generic enough, you can build any Riemann surface. Okay, and the examples I mentioned in the beginning, some of them were derived in this way by understanding first spheres with two punctures and then creating from them spheres with more than two punctures. Okay. So next is the question of Abhijit that he asked several minutes ago. So we have discussed starting from, say, 6 dimensions and 4 dimensions and flowing to the same theory, but you can ask the following question. You can start in 6D with different quantum field theories in 6D, deform them in different ways by different geometries, and end up with the same quantum field theory or CFT in 4D. Okay. So usual duality, like cyber duality, you start from 4D and end in 4D. We discussed the cross-dimensional dualities when you start in different dimensions, but of course, this is a natural question whether you can do that. And in fact, we have many examples of this. Okay, so I will list a couple of examples. For example, if you take certain number of M5 branes, some 2,0 theory, compactify it on some very particular type of a 3-punctured sphere, you can obtain in 4 dimensions what is called the E8 Minahan-Nemeshansky theory with n equal to supersymmetry. You can obtain the same theory by starting from what is called the E-string theory and compactify it on a torus. So different starting point in 6 dimensions, different deformation, but the same theory in 4D. And there are many examples of that.
Shlomo, how do the parameter space, how does the parameter
Exactly. So this is an example of a theory. It's a torus, but you don't see the modulus of the torus here. So this is an example of what we discussed before. Okay.
No, but
this theory, naively, you would expect to have the modulus, but you don't see it here. Sorry?
That means I cannot compactify on anything I want. It is some fixed parameter.
No, you know, a naive explanation is that naively you have a parameter here. So there is this other thing you can ask. Why the compactification only depends on the complex structure modular? Why doesn't it depend on the metric? And you know, the general law is that details of the metric are washed away. You can do it, you can start with any metric, but the difference is washed away once you are in 4D. And there is this holographic paper by Leonardo, Chris Beam, and Nikolai Bobev, who embedded some compactification in ADS and saw this uniformization happening in RG in holography. So here, I would say you can think of a similar thing. Naively, you have a dependence on the complex structure moduli, but somehow nothing depends on it in 4D. Once you end in 4D, you just, you know, it's a parameter, but nothing depends on it. You can compactify on any torus with any complex structure moduli, it just doesn't become a parameter of 4D. It acts trivially in 4D.
Okay.
Okay. But it's a very good question. This question we don't know how exactly and when things don't depend on these parameters. What is the mechanism exactly? Not just, you know, with these vague words, we don't understand.
Okay.
Here is another example. And here you start again from some 6D theory, something which is called SU3 minimal SCFT in 6 dimensions, compactify it on a 4-punctured sphere, or you compactify an E-string on a genus 2 surface. This is something I mentioned before. You get this type of a theory, okay, which in both cases exactly the same theory. Why? We don't know. This is an example of a 6-dimensional duality. And here, again, to a question of Abhijit, naively, there is a dimension of conformal manifold that we expect from here, another dimension which we expect from here. You know, these are these two pieces. But what you actually see in this case, that the dimension is this one plus this one. So somehow there is, you have the dimension of, you know, there is a geometric interpretation of this, geometric interpretation of this, and they combine somehow to a bigger structure. So why this happens, again, we don't know, but there are many examples of that. We don't understand them systematically.
Sorry, Shlomo, this must be coincidence, right? For particular small values, these G's and so on, not some family equation.
No, you are right. But there are many such coincidences. Okay. So we don't understand them. There are many such coincidences. And, you know, in this general understanding that, you know, you know, the situation is similar to what we knew about cyber dualities like 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago. There are many examples, but in a sense, there were all coincidences. You know, we knew about these dualities. There might have been brain constructions of these dualities, but in a sense, they were all kind of ad hoc derivations. And I think with this geometric picture, many of these things are systematized by going to higher dimensions. So I think, again, this is an open question. All of these 6D dualities, these coincidences, probably should be understood by embedding this not in field theory, but in string and M theory. You know, there are geometric constructions of these 6.
I just meant by coincidences, I just meant that the dimension turns out to be the sum of the two.
Ah, yes, this is.
I mean, this is not true for
I would say generically,
GA, right? It's true only for this particular case, or in general for.
Well, this is like most of the examples that we know of these 6D dualities correspond to a torus with some flux, and these are pretty weird to start with. This is a nice case because it's a 4-punctured sphere. It's already like generic enough, and this is a genus 2 surface, which in a sense is generic enough. So what I would expect if you take two theories and compactify them on non-trivial surfaces like that, I would expect to see the complex structure moduli of both of these. You know, maybe it's not a summate, but maybe they are identified in some way. But I would expect to see parameters coming from both of these guys.
Okay.
So if the two things are dual to each other, don't you expect that the dimensionality of the moduli space of both of them are the same instead of
it's the same? So from the perspective of this compactification, you expect, you say, this dimensionality of moduli space, and then this is an accident. This happens, this doesn't contradict anything. This is some accidental extra exactly marginal deformation. From the perspective of this guy, you expect this thing, but then you also see this one, and this is an accident. Like it's some, you know, something special happens, you expect this, but you get more than you expect.
I would have thought that if these two are dual to each other, I would have thought that the green expression should be equal to the yellow expression, right?
No, yeah, so we don't know how to explain this. So you start in 6D from two different theories, compactify on two different surfaces, and I don't know why you should get the same theory. What we know is that you get the same theory. Why? I don't know. Okay. And again, I think the way to understand this type of 6D dualities is to embed them in string theory. There are geometric constructions of these QFTs in 6D. And maybe by manipulating these geometries in string theory, F theory, or whatnot, maybe you can derive these types of dualities. Okay, this is again something to be done. Okay, so I'm severely over time, so let me go over this last point very quickly. So in all of these discussions that we had, we discussed understanding lower dimensional physics starting from higher dimensional physics. But you can go the other way around. And the basic idea is very old, is this idea of the construction. So let me mention it in a more modern language, in a little bit more modern language. So the basic observation is that, for example, if you take a 2,0 theory, a certain class of 2,0 theories in 6 dimension and compactify them on a torus with punctures of certain types, you get a simple n equal 2 circular quiver theory. Okay, this goes back to the work of Gayotto and maybe even before. Now, the statement of the construction, which again was phrased slightly differently by these people when they discovered it or conjectured it, is as follows. Take this theory in 4 dimensions, this particular quiver theory, and do some kind of a double scaling limit. You take a lot of punctures, you take the limit of a lot of punctures, and you remove them. Removing the punctures field theoretically corresponds to giving vacuum expectation values to certain baryonic operators in this theory. Okay, basically punctures correspond to some U1 symmetries, and what you do, you give vacuum expectation values to operators which are charged under these U1 symmetries. And in this double scaling limit, in some way, you obtain the 6-dimensional theory back on a finite size torus. Okay, so somehow having a lot of punctures blows up this Riemann surface, and then you remove these punctures. Okay, so this is how you can get this non-Lagrangian 6D theory, starting from a Lagrangian from 4 dimensions. It's still a conjecture. It's not extremely well tested, but it is an idea which is out there for many, many years, and you can try to test it more. So one thing that you can do.
Non-Lagrangian. Yes? I mean, what makes it non-Lagrangian? Starting from a Lagrangian theory, what makes it non-Lagrangian?
So this theory is there is no construction of this SCFT starting from fields in 6 dimensions. You cannot. What we can say is that this theory is the theory living on NM5 branes. You take M5 branes, and then you get this theory, but there is no description of this theory in terms of fields in 6 dimensions.
No, that I understand, but you just said that you go from the 4-dimensional theory to the 6.
Yes, but it's a weird limit. So I would say it's a Lagrangian construction, but it's not a Lagrangian for the 6D theory. So in this construction, basically you take the number of fields to be infinite. That's one thing you do. You take this quiver to be large. Like this is a limit, like in some rough sense, this extra dimension, this is a 4-dimensional theory, and this extra dimension of the torus comes from the field space of this quiver theory. So you go to the limit that you have infinite number of dimensions on one hand. On the other, you trigger a flow by giving vacuum expectation values to an infinite number of operators. So it's a very weird type of construction. For example, it's not computationally powerful. You barely can compute anything with this construction. Okay. But it is a claim which exists there. So one thing that one can do, since we now understand compactifications of many 6D theories on tori with punctures, we can try to come up with the constructions of many other 6D SCFTs. Again, we don't know 6D Lagrangians for any of them, but we can proceed with the same procedure for them. Take a torus with many punctures, take the number of punctures to infinity, turn on vevs, and hope for the best. Okay, so for A-type conformal matter, D-type of conformal matter, for large families of these 4-dimensional theories, 6-dimensional theories, sorry, we can mimic the procedure of the construction.
Sorry,
the problem, yes.
You know some n equals 1 theories in 6D, right, with Lagrangian. And in that case, this would put you can test.
They are not conformal, like 6-dimensional theories. You know descriptions of these 6-dimensional theories on their tensor branch, okay, which is like analogously to saying that the Coulomb branch of 4D theories. Yes. So like on their moduli space, effective description, but these are infrared free theories. Yeah. You don't know the origin. You cannot describe the origin of this moduli space.
Sorry, Shlomo, this deconstruction idea sounds similar to the way that, let's say, a D3 brane on a circle can be described by an infinite number of D2 branes on a circle.
Exactly. It's the same idea. That's right. Okay. But the difference is that, like, when you go from 4D to lower dimension, you know what the 4D theory is. You kind of can, that's where the basic idea of the construction I believe came. They first did the 4D n equals 4 down to 3D, and then push this to higher dimensions. 4D to lower dimensions, the starting point, the end point, but here the starting 6D point is murky.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
But that's also why it is interesting, I think. That's it's just the open question here is to make this thing quantitative. It's a beautiful idea, but how do we compute things with this thing?
So one question, sorry. Can we take a further limit which makes this torus very, very thin, going to 5 dimensions? So make a procedure where you go from 4 dimensions to 5 dimensions instead, and there, it's a 5D theory, presumably on just a line, or a big circle, and then maybe
Yes.
I don't
Right.
just
Right. I think you can do it in this particular case. You can go to 5D, and in 5D, you, like if you take a 2,0 theory on a circle to 5D, you obtain a maximally supersymmetric Yang-Mills in 5D. So by doing these waves, you basically identify all the gauge groups, and then you can go in 5 dimensions to to a gauge theory, which is just a dimensional reduction of the 6D theory. Maybe it's one of the only consistency checks of this procedure.
Yes. That's just the D3 branes on a circle and D4.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
So one program one can perform is just deconstructing everything. This wasn't performed. There are some clear conjectures that one can do, but the question is, there is a classification of 6D SCFTs in F theory and whatnot. Can you classify them by these deconstruction procedures, for example? Another idea is as follows, and this connects to the fractons, and with that I will end. So again, I want to kind of emphasize what is happening here. So you start from 6D theory, you introduce these punctures. You can think of these punctures and some sort of defects in 6 dimensions. And then you go to 4 dimensions, and what it means is that you describe this theory in terms of some effective field theory. Okay, so in a sense, it's very analogous, say, by starting from QED, say from atoms, and describing some lattice with QED, and then going to some effective Lagrangian described in terms of spins. Okay, it captures part of the interactions in low energy and so on. And then this deconstruction is somehow taking the continuum limit. Of course, in lattice systems, you don't recover back the full QED. You obtain some effective theory describing this lattice, but it's like you can go, from some continuum theory to a lattice system, and then you can ask what happens to the system once you go to the continuum. And again, the way you go to the continuum here is by turning on vacuum expectation values to some baryonic operators. And this is this picture that I said in words. You go from this theory back to the continuum theory in 6 dimensions. Now, what is interesting about these lattice theories, like these quiver theories, which one can use for the construction, is that they have a lot of global symmetries. And if you think of this lattice of fields, like this quiver lattice in 4 dimensions, as some type of lattice, it possesses what is now called subsystem symmetries. It has a lot of global symmetries, but only fields, not all of the fields are charged under those symmetries. You can say that fields that lie on certain directions or sub-loci of this lattice are charged under some of these symmetries. And then there are operators which are charged under these subsystem symmetries, and these correspond not to baryonic operators, which you use to go to perform the deconstructions, but to kind of operators winding this quiver. Okay, if you wish, like this type of a quiver is a generalization of a circular quiver, where these winding operators are the n=1 chiral fields and the n=2 vector multipliers. So these correspond to some kind of a Coulomb range operators. So you can ask what happens if you turn on vacuum expectation values for these operators which wind the quiver, which again parameterize some type of a generalized Coulomb range. Giving waves to these operators, you don't break the subsystem symmetries. Okay, and it's not clear what you will get. So an interesting open question is whether studying these types of constructions, you can obtain some type of continuum limit of a system of a theory with subsystem symmetry, and this is the hallmark of these fractonic models. Okay, so this is another I think interesting open question to embed these fractonic novel types of understanding into again this vanilla 4-dimensional physics. So let me finish with this picture. So this is the kind of the basic idea that is under investigation here, that we have a lot of relations between theories in different types of dimensions, and we are trying to kind of extract the basic ingredients, the most basic types of statements that we can make. And there is a lot of evidence that there is some kind of pyramid in this structure, that everything comes from higher dimensions. And again, the last comment was that maybe the pyramid is a bit misleading. Maybe there is like 4 dimensions, for example, is special. And maybe we can even, you know, starting from 4 dimensions and going higher, we can derive higher dimensional physics or not. There is a lot of structure to be extracted by studying this across-dimensional relations. There are many open questions, so let me just leave you with these few ones. Thank you very much for your attention and all your questions.
Thank you very much, Shlomo, for a wonderful talk. Let's all unmute and applaud. We have had many questions during the talk, of course, but if Shlomo is patient enough, maybe we can have a couple more questions.
Let me start, Shlomo. Sorry. One of the themes of the first part of your talk was that a lot of what you see in 4 dimensions and lower can be traced back to something sort of universal happening in 6 dimensions.
Yes.
However, the number of structures in 6 dimensions was itself very large. Right? If there was just one theory in 6 dimensions that gave rise to everything in 4 dimensions, that would be like a fantastic unification. But you've got all these infinite number of theories in 6 dimensions. And I was wondering whether there was any sense in which you could unify this infinite set further.
Right.
So, the vagueness of the question. Yeah.
Right. So there are 2 answers to that. One is that there are many theories in 6 dimensions, but there are much less than there are in lower dimensions. So there is a claim of classification even of all 6D SCFTs. So in a sense, they come very roughly. For example, one classification that one can do, this was done by Lakshya Bhardwaj many years ago, one can just write all the possible non-anomalous Lagrangians in 6 dimensions and think of them as effective tensor branch theories in 6 dimensions. And there is, he classified all of these. So there is some infinite number, but very structured set of these tensor branch theories. There are some issues there, whether all of these theories correspond to 6D SCFTs or whether, you know, he captured all of these 6D SCFTs, but basically the claim is that we know everything. This is not true, for example, about n=2 or n=1 for sure in lower dimensions. There is a whole zoo of theories. There is no claim of any classification. So once you go higher in dimensions, there are much less CFTs. That's answer number 1. And answer number 2 is that the bigger structure is string theory. That all of these 6D SCFTs are constructed in string theory. Like the reason we know they exist is because we have some construction in string theory. The way I presented the things here and the things I do and I know about them are all field theoretic. So, but with these field theoretic constructions, there is a glass ceiling that you hit. For example, these 6D dualities in the end, there is no way I can think of that you can explain in field theoretic framework. You need to go to this bigger structure.
So I was wondering, sort of practically speaking, maybe this is far out, but if you knew the index of one of these theories, if you could invent a machine to predict the index of any other theory, that would be a computational way of sort of indicating the universality. Do you think there's any hope of something like that?
You mean index of a 6D theory and then predicting the index in lower dimensions?
No, 6D, of one of the 6D theories to another 6D theory. To sort of say that the same information is contained in all of them, but just distributed differently somehow. I mean, perhaps via theory or whatever, I don't know.
Why do you say the same information is in all of them?
Well, I was hoping that the idea was that there was some universal information that is.
Oh, there is some. Oh, yeah. Maybe there is a way I would say again, like something like. Yeah, there is some classification of these
among the universality classes.
Right. Yeah, so I would say there is this string theory which is behind all of this, and then you can think, compute the indices of all this in terms of, geometrical construction of these theories from string theory. And kind of that would be great. Maybe that's what you meant, like something.
That maybe that's in some deep sense, but I was hoping that in the end it would allow you to go from one to the other without going through string theory. That,
yeah, maybe. So these tensor branch theories, they are very modular. You can like start from simple pieces. Actually, there is a finite number of basic building blocks. They're called like non-Higgsable clusters. There is some technical name, and from them, gauging symmetries and concatenating them, you can construct the theories corresponding for a generic tensor branch. So the question then, the idea would be maybe to extract the index of the CFT from some properties of this tensor branch. And then there is some finite number of building blocks from which you can construct everything. So that might be the case.
Okay, thanks a lot. Sorry for the vagueness.
Yeah, it's not completely outrageous. It seems that you should not be able to reconstruct things from the tensor branch about the CFT, but there are hints that you can do that even in 4D. Like, for example, if you take a 4-dimensional unequal 2 theories, you can compute the index of the CFT, and you can go on the Coulomb branch of this theory. And the theory seems much simpler on the Coulomb branch. But there are strong hints that at least some versions of the index, the so-called, say, the Schur index, can be reconstructed from the Coulomb branch. This is the work of Gayotto, Cordova, and Chuang Shao. It's not well understood why. They understood it technically. Like they count like BPS particles on the Coulomb branch, and then from counting these particles, they can reconstruct the super conformal index at the origin. So maybe something like that can be done in 6D.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me go back to what I was trying to say.
Yes.
It's kind of vague. What the thing is that, see, in ADS-CFT,
Yes.
the strong coupling version of the conformal field theory is a string theory. I mean, it is a string theory, but you can look upon it in the low alpha prime limit to be a gauge, to be a supergravity, right?
Okay.
So a strong coupling version of a 4-dimensional theory is a 10-dimensional theory in a certain sense. So,
okay.
So there are some 6 extra dimensions emerging when you RG flow from the IR theory to the strong coupling region. In that sense, I was saying that since there are these bosonic dimensions emerging due to the flow, maybe these fermionic dimensions that emerge when you go from this n equal to 1 theory in 4 dimensions to n equal to 4 theory in 3 dimensions. Since you have more thetas, since you have more fermionic parameters, the Grassmann parameters which give rise to the manifestly supersymmetric nature of the theories, maybe those thetas arise, extra thetas arise due to the RG flows in the same sense that the supergravity extra dimensions arise in the case of the n equals 4 supergravities. It's very weird, but I mean,
yes, I understand. I think I understand the statement. In ADS-CFT, I would say the way I view it, we have 2 different descriptions. We have the description in string theory, and we have a field theoretic description. These are just 2 different descriptions of the same thing. And also here you can, maybe there is a way to study these RG flows, just, very simple-mindedly, just start from 4D and go to 3D. And maybe there is another way to view this thing. I don't know. I just don't know how to do that systematically.
Yeah, it's very vague.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if there are no further questions, let's all thank Shlomo again for a wonderful talk.